welcome. Welcome back to the Sprinklr Coffee Club. I'm Marshall Kirkpatrick, your host for the Sprinklr Coffee Club, broadcasting from here at home in video, sometime soon, and hopefully in audio as well. Hope you'll join us for that. Thanks so much for joining us here for today's episode of the Sprinklr Coffee Club. I am so excited to have my good friend, Adam Duvander, here on the show today. Hello, Adam.
Marshall, good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Adam is one of the most influential people in the world regarding the topic of developer marketing, APIs, content creation for developer audiences. He's a technical marketing thought leader and a fascinating guy, not to mention a real sweetheart. So I'll stop with that. I could go on, but now that all those forms of praise have been said, as you deserve, Adam, how do you describe yourself, and how do you introduce folks to your history and work? Can we start out that way?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny that you mentioned the marketing, because I believe my LinkedIn says that I'm an accidental marketer, and I definitely feel that way for sure. Yeah, I mean, the work that I do with every developer, I describe it as helping API and dev tool companies to create great content for the technical audience and anything that educates and inspires. So sometimes that's documentation, but a lot of times it's sort of higher level kind of content.
That's fantastic. Well, and I invited you on the show because I want to hear about that, but I also think that a broader audience of marketers and change makers are apt to learn a lot and be inspired by your experience in general. But I think that there's probably a lot of lessons that can be extrapolated from the world of developer marketing into marketing in general.
I think so. Yeah. Excited about chatting about it from across Portland. When we first talked about this, we were talking about doing it in person, but
yes, we scheduled this even before the pandemic broke out, or before it was affecting our lives so directly. How has COVID-19 affected your work, Adam? What are you seeing in the developer marketing world?
Yeah. So when I've been in-house at companies, I would do a lot more conferences and things. I've limited that over the years naturally with kids at home. But especially since I've been working for myself, I've done a lot less of it. But I had a few conferences coming up and was sad to see them either canceled or turned virtual, which is, the reason that I go to those is to be able to connect in person with people. And so I think that is an important part, even of developer marketing, even though I preach content first approaches to that. So that's been the biggest impact for sure. I mean, I've seen it with clients who had event plans, and now they have to look for different ways to try to reach the same audiences.
And you have argued for quite some time that sending people out to events is great, but doesn't scale as well as content, right?
Yeah. That was, the very first developer company I worked for was SendGrid, which email infrastructure, and kind of the original pitch. I was coming from my programmable web journalism, pseudo journalism days, and kind of the pitch was, let's take the great things that this evangelism team is doing and let's help scale it with content. And so get those voices that might be used for just the 50 or 100 or 200 people in an audience, and let's reach more and have it. I mean, there are still SendGrid blog posts that people are reading today that were written back then, right? So has a much longer life potentially.
Yeah. And what does that look like when you work with a company to do content for developer marketing? What's the structure of it look like?
So yeah, I think one of the reasons that people come to me is not just for the content itself, which of course is important, but kind of the like that what is that angle? What is that journalistic angle that you can take to reach more developers? And so Yeah, so it's kind of a collaborative process of being able to understand the client's specific developer audience, which there's, not one kind of developer. So you have to kind of figure out what's the angle here that works for them, which a lot of times they'll know some of, and kind of go back and forth, and then kind of use that journalistic taste to try to figure out what's the thing that's going to resonate.
And then you write a series of blog posts, do
Yeah, and then
ebooks. What
so
does
then
the
the
output look
output
like?
then the output is whatever content is needed uh, for that company. So a lot of times I feel like a blog post is a good place to start. It's a place where you can test a bunch of ideas, and um, and be able to see kind of what sticks. But then sometimes some of those pieces are a little more product focused, where documentation would make more sense. Like a lot of times what I'll see that's missing is a real getting started guide. Like someone has found you. Now how do they actually have success? And so then that isn't something that's going to live in a blog post. That will live in the documentation, and hopefully be a prime piece of documentation where it gives them that first experience with an API or a developer tool. Um,
Mhm.
and so other types of documentation like that, and for sure it can expand uh, to ebooks or other types of guides. Lately, I've been doing more of these, what I call signature content. This sort of larger piece that really gets at a particular topic that the company knows a lot about, and can be kind of the definitive guide that they have on that topic. And so those are, I mean, in length you might call them ebooks, but they sit on the site as a you can maybe bundle them up, and when you say ebook, I think of like gating that with an email address, which can work. Developers bristle a little bit at that. So being able to balance that with, here is all this content available for you, and you will enjoy it and learn from it, and then remember that it came from me. That's typically the developer approach that works, with kind of the, would you like this in a bundled, easier way? Like, why don't you give us your email address and we'll send that to you? So I think that
Mm.
that sort of balanced approach can work.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So not creating scarcity, but offering a higher level of accessibility, and abundance and ease in exchange for contact information.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting. And what uh, what can you tell us about the scale or frequency of these kinds of developer marketing operations? How often are they putting out pieces of content? How much content?
Yeah, that varies based on the client also. I mean, in some cases they'll have they'll have robust internal content engines, and they're looking for additional fuel, and perhaps an authentic, not inauthentic, an authentic voice to add to that. But I mean, I think that when I talk to people about starting their programs, my answer to how much they should blog, for example, is two. And people are like, two what? And it's like, well, what did you ask how many per week? Did you ask how many per month? Did you ask how many per year? The answer is two, because everyone wants an answer, right? And doing more than you're doing now is another
Yes.
way to say that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of my clients are kind of at the once a week, every other week kind of cadence. Some more than that for sure. Um,
Hmm.
but I think making sure that the content that you put out fits with that audience, and that's maybe what's changed the most for me in my time is trying to be more strategic with the content you put out, and really making sure that it speaks to, you know, things that developers are actually talking about and searching for.
And how
And
do you determine that?
so, I mean, there are a bunch of tools you can look at for keyword research. So kind of SEO tools. I use Ahrefs in a lot of the work I do. I mean, you can use the Google suggest bar and get, you know, partway there, right? With the type of, at least choosing between types of content or words to use. Yeah. So, um, yeah, as opposed to just trying to hit sort of a cadence for the sake of hitting the cadence, which was maybe a lot more kind of the journalistic approach, because it was just it's a different market. I mean, when I was writing and editing programmable web, we we had volume that we wanted to hit, and we had a sponsorship based revenue model. And a lot of these companies that I work for are instead looking to engage developers and be able to hopefully solve their problem and do it with their product. So
So relevance is much more important
exactly.
than
Yeah.
frequency.
Yeah.
That makes me think about a report that Forrester came out with in October. I wonder if you have any thoughts in response to their conclusion. They suggested that many brands are looking to industry thought leaders or influencers with the assumption that they will bring reach with them, and they're ending up disappointed. And instead, the most savvy of brands are looking to thought leaders and influencers for relevance, to
Mhm.
find a path towards really authentic, high quality content that can break through the noise of all the content that's out there, uniquely so. And then those savvy brands are bringing the reach themselves with paid sponsorship
Right. Okay.
budgets
Yeah.
to advertise the content.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And that seems right in line with kind of the way that I've shifted my approach over the years too, to be a lot more focused on that relevance. I think there is sort of an issue where you have to try a bunch of things to find the things that are relevant. So, I mentioned these signature content pieces where you kind of put it all into this one guide. Well, that's good, and you should do that, but there are other you can't only do that, because then that's kind of an all or nothing approach, right? So
That's
so
only
being
one
able
thing, and you
yeah,
need two.
yeah, that's right.
Two is the answer.
Uh, so being able to plant a lot of seeds and see what comes up, and from your own journalistic time, that you get better at that. So you start to suss out what could work. So hopefully you're planning fewer than you would have to if you were just guessing, right? But I mean, it reminds me, my probably number one post in all the time at Programmable Web came out of doing this series of daily kind of what's happening in the API space things. And these were like looking through people who were tweeting and just trying to find a few topics. Actually, the biggest thing it came from was we would get more press releases than we could turn into posts. So it was a way to be able to say yes to more people by having these, kind of link posts. And so through that, I found Parse, which was a backend as a service that ended up being acquired by Facebook. They had someone tweeted about them having an apply via API, so you could like apply to work on their team by sending an API request. And so,
Cool.
because I had sort of that experience of seeing what sticks, I said, like, this is not an item for a list post. This is its own. It needs to have its own. So by being able to test those things, I was able to recognize when there was something that would kind of strike a nerve at a greater level. And so then I think I wrote it in like 8 minutes, and yeah, and it got tons and tons of views, which was the metric that a that a
Yeah.
media company looks for, right? Um, and Parse was happy with it too, because I think for them their metric was people knowing about them and potentially applying to be an engineer.
Very cool. So test, learn, and build a contextual understanding that allows for more informed discernment about which topics to really invest in uh, versus relating to it in a more superficial way.
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool. You like to use the phrase uh, "share knowledge, not features."
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I used it so much. It was kind of the mantra at SendGrid with the developer relations team that it became its own site. So share knowledge, not features.com. You can hear a little more about the approach. But that came out of my programmable web time also. So again, getting press releases all the time. And these are for technical, for API topics. And like everyone, like all of them looked the same. It was just, we have a new API, check out our API. And it was, and what's the API do? It does, let me give you some bullet points about this API. Like it was, there was no actual knowledge sharing going there. It was purely looking at kind of the internals. And I think that happens because for technical products, it is often a non-technical person who's putting that together, and you end up having to list the features because you don't understand enough about what the real developer benefits are. And so I felt like that was my job at programmable web, was to take those and determine why should a developer care. And and I kind of thought, like, shouldn't that be their job? Shouldn't they be the one? Like, why am I the one who's doing this based on their press releases? And so that
mhm.
became the mantra once I was on the other side at SendGrid, was let's make sure that in what we do, we don't, like, we are proud to announce, is like, it makes me cringe when I write or read that phrase. So I don't write it. Uh, and that's the sharing features part. It just gets you in sharing features mode. And so you need to find a way to flip that.
Wow. Well, I imagine you stood out as a journalist in part because of your willingness and ability to do that work, to wrap the features in context. Most journalists are not. And then when you flipped over to the other side to have that perspective and really be able to execute on it is makes for some really compelling marketing.
I hope so. Yeah. And and again, I didn't at that point realize that I was a marketer, but I did at some point recognize in that SendGrid role, and I've experienced this at other places, that I was kind of a translator between the the marketing group and a developer kind of approach. And so at SendGrid, that was the more traditional marketing and the community focused developer relations side of that. And so kind of sitting as a translator. And I feel like that's still kind of my role, even in the work I do with clients. I'm working with marketing departments a lot of times. Sometimes they're highly technical and could sit right alongside me in sort of my developery ways, which I have a developer background. I sometimes forget to mention that. Um, but computer science degree, and was a developer, and so that's sort of where that comes from. So sometimes my clients have that as well, but a lot of times they don't. And so I help to kind of translate what's that audience expect.
Hmm. So you have said that content marketing is a long game, that you have to plant a lot of seeds and you're never sure for sure which of them will come to fruition. How do you balance that and short-term pressures to drive pipeline and revenue
Yeah.
immediately?
So part of it is expectation setting, um, and letting clients know that this is about trying a bunch of things, and it's about the time it takes, even for the for the search engines, for Google to recognize that, oh, you are influential on these keywords, we should move you up in the rankings, right? So that does take time. So both the experimentation and the SEO approach take time. So part of that's setting expectations, but also knowing expectations also. So if someone is looking, and I have clients that fit this too, that are looking for more immediate results, that changes the type of content that you might do. So something like apply via API that I mentioned is much more likely to have kind of that initial spike, and less likely to have the long lifetime of being, a SEO keyword that people type in. People aren't typing, "Oh, I want to apply for a job via API."
Something dazzling and unusual
Exactly.
versus
Yeah.
reliable and useful.
Yeah. And so that changes that approach. And for a lot of those clients, I talk them into a mixture of that, um because it's hard to play that to play that game where everything has to have this initial spike. And that game is definitely a lot of seeds. And in that case, the seeds either sprout immediately uh or get moldy. I don't, it's they yeah, so that game is a much harder game that I've definitely done before in the journalistic times. But yeah, I try to talk them into to making sure that some of their sites are set long term, because
Yeah.
that's going to uh, you know bear fruit over and over and over again.
If you've got a home run driven strategy, yeah, how many at bats does it take? How many blog posts does it take? How many pieces of content does it take to reliably hit a home run?
That's a question you want
Yeah,
to.
2. All right, is the answer no? Oh, how yeah, that is a question, Adam. But any
uh,
thoughts on that question?
that depends if you're Ted Williams or you're Mendoza. No one remembers Mendoza's first name. Maybe you do. I don't. Yeah. I mean, that's a little glib, but it's also true, right? It depends on kind of the product that you have that is behind that. But I think that it takes more at bats that way to get the results you want than the long term strategy. And so that's why I gravitate toward that, because I've seen that now at multiple companies and with multiple clients as well, where you hit that search term that brings in a couple hundred developers a week, and that for a lot of companies actually can make a pretty big difference. Um, because a lot of times for more dev focused stuff, as opposed to consumer oriented, like a couple hundred is really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think in the enterprise B2B world, it's
Right.
comparable as well. Any uh, any other closing thoughts about what uh, marketers at large can learn from developer marketing?
Yeah, a lot of times people, maybe sometimes traditional marketers, will read that share knowledge, not features um, post and say, well, isn't that just good marketing? Shouldn't, you know, like, why is this special for developers? Shouldn't everyone uh, be able to, right, to be able to share benefits and not features? And my answer is always yes, I think so, but why don't they? Like, I think if you look at average developer marketing, that it's better than average non-developer marketing. And I think the reason is that developers won't let you get away with below average. Developers expect that you are going to bring some knowledge, that you're going to educate them, that you're going to inspire them, and they will go away. And I think that other audiences are less particular, and maybe you can get away with average for them. And so I think the takeaway for all marketers is to remember that you have an audience that thirsts for you to teach them the best practices of what you know. And there's actually a great book by Kathy Sierra that you have probably read, Marshall, called Badass. That it's oh, it's great. It's basically about have a if you have a camera, if you sell cameras, you should make your customers better at taking pictures. And so that's kind of the approach throughout. And I think that definitely works in software. It definitely works with developers. I mean, I think that's an approach that just makes sense um, across the board.
Me too. Me too. And I think that as we face more and more challenges, more and more content out there, all of us are going to need to rise to that challenge, and learning from what you and your peers have done in the very discerning developer marketing world is some pretty awesome advice. So thank you so much
Oh, of course. Thanks for
for the
having me.
time and these thoughts. Folks, if you want to connect with Adam online, and I highly recommend it, he is Adam D on Twitter. And any place else, Adam, that you'd recommend?
Everydeveloper.com.
That's right, everydeveloper.com. All right. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us here at the Sprinklr Coffee Club. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you'll join us next time. Adam, it's great to talk to you again.
The same. Yeah.
Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, you too.